We're asked to use the quadratic formula to solve. Normally we write it as x equals, but it's really whatever variable you're talking about. In this case, it's going to be q equals negative e plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c, all being divided by 2 times a. Make sure everything, not just the square root. This isn't a quadratic formula. This is quadratic form. I've set it equal to 0. Going to have descending powers. So what you have to do is you have to distribute that 8q. So 8q times q makes 8q squared. Then 8q times negative 2, that makes negative 16q. And then we have a plus 10 hanging out here. Now it's ready for the quadratic formula. I'm tempted to do, let's see, I hope it doesn't make it too much more complicated. Look, you can make your life a little bit easier by, look, they're all even numbers. Factor out of 2. That's going to be 5 because I'm dividing everything by 2. Now I have smaller numbers to deal with. Because look, all you have to do is find out what it takes to make this be 0. And 0 times 2 still makes 0, right? So in order to find out what it takes to make this be 0, we can use the quadratic formula where our b is negative 8. So that's negative negative 8. I'm going to write a positive 8 here. And now it's negative 8 squared minus 4 times a times c. That's all over 2 times a. And so simplifying inside, we got negative 8 squared. That makes 64. 4 times 4 is 16. And then 16 times 5 makes 80. Uh-oh. Did I do everything right? Because this is going to give us something imaginary. Maybe that's what it's asking to do. 8q times 8q squared minus 16q plus 10. That's fine. Factor out the 2. Yeah, I guess we're going to have imaginary numbers. So I'll show you what that is here in just a second. I did 4 times 4 times 5, that makes 80. And then 2 times 4 in the bottom makes 8. So simplifying a bit more, this is 8 plus or minus the square root of negative 16 over 8. Look, the square root of 16 is 4, right? The square root of negative 16 is 4i. And to show you where that comes from, I think we've already seen in this class that I squared equals negative 1. So the square root of negative 16, that's the same thing as the square root of 16 times the square root of, whoa, that doesn't help us. Square root of negative 1 is I. That's the definition of imaginary number. That's what I meant to say. The square root of negative 1 is I. So you can rewrite the square root of negative 16 as square root of 16 times negative 1. And now this is just I, like we were saying here. So square root of 16, that's 4. Square root of negative 1, that's I. That's where we get that from. And we can simplify even more. Look, now you can break it up in 2 separate fractions. 8 divided by 8, and then 4i divided by 8. That makes 1/2 I. So I think that's probably the answer they're looking for. Let me see if I can type this in. Yeah, so they're asking me to use a comma to separate my answers. So one was plus, and there's my comma, and then one was minus. So 1 plus 1/2 I, 1 minus 1/2 I. Let's see if it likes that. Okay. Yeah, it does. So that one had imaginary solutions. The discriminant is this part in the square root in the quadratic formula. Okay, that's the discriminant, because that really dictates what type of answers you're going to get. Look, if this equals 0, if somehow these all perfectly cancel out and made 0, then you're doing plus or minus 0. So if the discriminant equals 0, there's one real solution. There's no imaginary numbers because square root of 0 is a real number, but it's doing plus or minus nothing, so we get one answer. If the discriminant is greater than 0, meaning if this is greater than 0, then you're going to have two real solutions, because you're going to be adding some real number and then you're going to subtract some real number, so you'll get two different answers. If the discriminant is less than 0, you'll have two imaginary numbers. Sorry for that terrible handwriting. Let's just find out what the discriminant is for this one. B squared minus 4 times A times C. So I got 25 Watch out for the negative signs. Negative 4 times negative 4 makes a positive 16, and then 16 times 3 is 48. So this number is greater than 0, so I'm going to say there's 2 real solutions. And yeah, I think that's everything I want you to do. There's 2 solutions, and they're both real. I just saw that the problem wanted to say whether they're rational or irrational. Look, 25 plus 48 makes 73. So the square root of 73 is an irrational number because it doesn't turn out to be like a square root of 16 equals 4. That would be rational. That would be something you could write as the ratio of 2 integers. So this is irrational because you can't simplify that square root and get rid of the square root symbol. Irrational. 2 irrational.